All right, we're going to go on to verse 5. Verse 5, to really just settle down the fact that this is an act of divine good. Again, verse 1 should already be enough by the grace which has been given. Verse 2, in case you're doubting, a testing, which resulted in the increase of grace. So this should already be enough. But here, if you want more evidence that this is considered divine good, their act of giving was qualified as divine good protection, we're going to see now in verse 5. Again, verse 4, he called it this grace, the grace. This grace resulted from the grace which has been given to them. But just really to settle the matter now, verse 5. And then after we're done with verse 5, we'll go over the doctrine of human good to be able to differentiate these two things. Human good and divine good are complete opposites. I mean, diametrically opposed to each other. Think about it this way. Okay, I said I was going to hurry up, but let me just do this. Think about self-righteousness for a bit. Self-righteousness has no virtue. Self-righteousness is arrogance. Let's put arrogance right here as the base. What do we know about arrogance? The opposite of arrogance is humility. Humility is the opposite of arrogance. The person who has no arrogance in a certain area, he is humble in that sense. So I need you to understand, first of all, that these are opposites. But let's look at a self-righteous person. Let's look at a self-righteous religious prig. And he's full of self-righteousness. He feels so good about himself. He feels like he's morally superior than other people, all based on arrogance. And he points at people and he shuns people because of their sins, and they're so immoral, and what are they doing, and all this stuff. And so he has increased his self-righteousness by a bunch of do-goodism, pointing fingers, judging. He probably feels good about some great feat that he did in the past, about giving money. He gave sacrificially. He, I don't know, walked on his knees maybe to La Basilica de Guadalupe or something, and something like that. So self-righteousness. This is arrogance. But real capacity righteousness, the righteousness that we grow from doctrine, experiential righteousness, is based on humility. And so the more you learn Bible doctrine, so when you advance in the plan of God, this self-righteousness has to be reduced. The arrogance is being reduced. And then finally you reach a point of humility. And you're thinking. And as you learn Bible doctrine, you increase. And that virtue, you build virtue on top of that original virtue called humility. Virtue is built upon virtue. And so you grow and you grow. And you grow in doctrine, you think grace, you love him personally, and all these things, and boom, you build that experiential capacity plus R, righteousness. The more doctrine you have, the more experiential righteousness you have, capacity righteousness. But you notice how opposite both real righteousness and self-righteousness are? Diametrically opposed. I mean, you really literally have to remove all this self-righteousness. Boom. Remove the arrogance. Finally acquire some humility in your thinking, and then you start building that capacity righteousness. And these are diametrically opposed. Well, just to give you an idea as to the divine good and the human good of people, of Christians, of unbeliever religious types. In order for something to be considered divine good, you have to have the doctrine, which produces humility, and that humility produces capacity righteousness, and from that capacity righteousness, you express it through many virtues, all based on grace, God's grace policy. All right, verse 5. Verse 5 in the NIV looks like this. And they exceeded our expectations. They gave themselves, first of all, to the Lord, and then by the will of God also to us. Okay, let's do this So now we have a kai. We're going to translate a connective kai for now. And then we have here a comparative adverb of kathos, just as. We're going to go literal for now. Later on we'll come up with the English, a more smooth English translation. And just as. Here is comparing something. They had an expectation, but it's denying it with ooh, and not just as. Not as. And the verb, the indicative here is elpisamen, elpitzo. Hope, expect. This is a cognate of elpis. We've seen it as hope 1 and hope 2, but this is a human expectation. This is hope, an expectation based on a subjective evaluation, based on not having all the facts. For Paul and his team did underestimate the Macedonians, and it's normal. We don't have all the facts many times. There you might have a few brothers who are advancing in the plan of God, and you're underestimating them. You see certain sins that they commit, certain struggles that they struggle with. They're still complaining and whining like a bunch of baby Christians. And you say, oh, okay, these guys are not growing much. But little do you know that the moment of pressure is given to them, they amaze you, they surprise you. They exceeded your expectations. Principle, many times, people have different ways of expressing their growth. They still struggle with certain sins that you don't struggle with and all that. So you cannot really evaluate people's growth based on little superficial things that you see. Paul, a spiritual giant, even he underestimated the Macedonians. So not just as we expected, not as we expected, elpisamen. This is the aorist tense. Paul and his team underestimated the Macedonians, assuming that their act of giving was going to be minimal, or perhaps with the wrong motives. So this is a constitutive aorist, collecting in one entirety, them underestimating the Macedonians. The active voice, Paul and his team, this is the first person plural, so we, it was Paul and those who were there in Macedonia. They produced the action of the verb of expecting as a way of expressing their underestimation of the Macedonians and their spiritual life. And the indicative mood is declarative. Not as we expected, because they gave above and beyond, and their motivation was correct. It was an act of divine good. And so now we have Allah, contrast. Not as we expected, but rather, just to make it emphatic for now, but rather, and now, aorist active indicative of didomi, edokan. They gave, they received grace, they give grace back. You receive grace from God, and you give grace back to Him by way of thanksgiving. And not only that, but in your horizontal relationship, you give grace to others. Here it is expressed as the participation in the ministry for the saints. Not as we expected, but they gave. And then we have an accusative direct object of the reflexive pronoun heautu. Edokan heautus. They gave themselves. They pretty much gave their lives. Watch it now. There's no such thing as giving your life without Bible doctrine. Watch it. There's no such thing as you getting ahead of God and giving yourself without the doctrinal capacity first. Watch it. So we have to be careful here. There's no such thing as being saved by giving your life to God. Who the hell said anything about giving your life to God? Can the unbeliever give anything beyond just a simple belief in Christ? Unfortunately, these Lordship salvationers, these people who adhere to the doctrine of the false doctrine of Lordship salvation, they got this wrong. If He is not the Lord of your life, you have to submit to the Lordship, His Lordship. Who makes God Lord? Who makes Christ Lord at the moment of salvation? It's the Holy Spirit who makes Him Lord. All the unbeliever can do at the moment of salvation is believe. That's all he has. He has no doctrine. How can he give? And if he does start giving, all that giving is going to be from the energy of his flesh, because that's all he has. That's all he knows. Sin nature activity by way of do-goodism. That's why you need to learn, grow Bible doctrine. Once you become a believer, now in phase 2, you learn. And from that doctrine, it becomes motivation to give, even if you want, sacrificially. They had enough doctrine, the Macedonians had enough doctrine to not just give, but give themselves. So I just had to say this now, because be careful. None of that giving yourself activity. Just wait, and you have to learn and learn. How much do you have to give to God right now? What does he expect from you? He expects from you to just use what you already know, first of all. The doctrine that you have, use it. Use 1 John 1:9 and apply the doctrine. What else do you have to give him? You have to give him a little bit of your time a day. That 1 or 2 hours, or 3 if you're already more advanced, of learning Bible doctrine under me, or under your right pastor. And that's how much time you give him. That's you giving what you have according to your capacity, doctrinal capacity. That's what he wants. Once you advance and you have enough doctrine all the way to gate 5, which is spiritual adulthood, that's when now you have enough love for him to give yourself. But how do you express that giving yourself? We express it by just wanting to learn and wanting to know God. And when you reach that point, you feel like you're not doing enough for him. It's never enough, such as Paul mentioned in Philippians chapter 3, verse 14. I do not categorize, or I do not conclude myself to have reached this, to have accomplished spiritual maturity. He was already mature, but it was never enough for him. He never thought that he had reached the goal already. And that's the way you feel when you love God. You feel like you're not doing enough for him. That's why you give yourself. That's why they thought that this grace was not enough. They gave themselves. And this is one of the characteristics of gate 5, spiritual self-esteem. That's the beginning of spiritual adulthood. And it only begins there. You have a long way to go. You have gate 6 to go to. You have to pass momentum testing at gate 7. And then you reach a gate 8, spiritual maturity. And even in gate 8 in Pleroma, there's still different levels, different ranks. You have a long way to go still. We all have a long way to go. So none of that giving yourself. The only time you're going to give yourself is when you have enough doctrine to the point that you love God. When you have that overflow of happiness. Overflow of happiness begins at gate 5. Okay, but rather they gave themselves. This aorist tense is a culminative aorist. Culminative aorist collects in one entirety the act of giving, but it emphasizes it from the results. They gave themselves. The active voice. The Macedonian Christians produced the action of the verb, and the indicative mood is it's declarative. Declaring they gave themselves. They were willing to give their lives to the Lord. Well, first of all, let's continue. Proton. Now we have this adjective of not just order or time, but order of importance. Adverb of, I said adjective, it's an adverb of importance. We're going to translate this first and foremost. They gave themselves first and foremost, proton. And then we have the dative of indirect object, the dative of advantage, of kurios, to the Lord, emphasizing the deity of Christ. This is the beginning of occupation with Christ. When you reach gate 5, you start building that problem-solving device, number 10, of occupation with Christ. Not only do you love God the Father as problem-solving device number 7, but you also start loving God the Son, the hypostatic union. It's problem-solving device number 10. But that's only the beginning. You still have a long way to grow. A long way to go, a long way to grow. First and foremost, to the Lord. This expresses the motivation. Everything that you do has to be done first and foremost to the Lord. And whatever it says else is secondary. And to us, to people. Whatever you do to people has to be done first and foremost to the Lord, and secondary to the people that you're helping out. Even when you sin is first and foremost against the Lord and secondary to the people, even though that sin harmed the person and it was directed towards a person, you sin against the Lord. Against you and only you I sinned, says David. So this is motivation, correct motivation, doing something as unto the Lord. Another expression that reveals to us that this is qualified as divine good. Correct motivation from Bible doctrine in the soul. Bible doctrine in the soul helps you appreciate Christ more, helps you love him more, to the point of doing something for him, giving yourself for him. Not for people, not for lust, not for attention or approbation, not because they admire Paul so much and they want his approbation. Paul here specifies first and foremost to the Lord.